Hello, this is Edward here from ChargeCore Studio, starting the first episode of hopefully many in this VB.NET series. We will start off with exam preparation, just basically going over some of the basic skills that we've learnt sort of in the first year, and then after episode 7 and after Comp 1 is out of the way, I'm going to sort of start to teach some of the basics of, or attempt to teach at least, some of the basics of Windows Forms applications. If you already know and are confident with VB syntax and sort of aren't taking Comp 1 and are just sort of watching this on YouTube, I would recommend skipping to episode 7, but if you need to sort of get to grips with the basics of the language and syntax and stuff, I'd say stick around. I'll also go into a few sort of tips and tricks, and episode 7 itself will be just basically going over the actual skeleton code rather than showing you how to do stuff. I'm going to start off with, but first of all, we're talking about data types. Now, I have this sort of very sort of crude graphic in here that showed basically all of the primitive data type is basically like your fundamental sort of what makes up your data in your program. So like if this was physics, you'd sort of say like, oh yeah, well that's like an electron, isn't it? Sorry, trying to relate programming to physics isn't going to work. But basically, everything else that you ever code will always be made up of these sort of fundamental data types. Data type is sort of like, well, it's the type of data that you're going to store in your variable under the variable identifier. I'll talk about declarations when I'm actually back in VB.NET. For now, just right. All of these data types is a topic for another day. I'm just sort of going to, first of all, they can sort of be grouped into numerical, textual, and sort of miscellaneous. So, yeah. Now, as you can see, they're sort of sorting themselves out. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about them all. Just for the record, U means unsigned, so like the standard version of it is signed, and S stands for signed because the standard version of it isn't signed. So in the case of our byte up there, bytes go from 0 to 256, or if it's an S byte, it will go from -128 to +127. As you probably guessed from signed and unsigned binary. Anyway, I'm just going to cut out the ones so that we've just got a list of sort of the basic ones that we're going to be sort of seeing the majority of the time. Obviously, if you're doing network programming, you probably use bytes for sending TCP packets, but that's different. So we've got double, which is like a number with a decimal place. I can't remember exactly what precision it's to. You can look it up on MSDN. I'll talk more about that later. Integer, obviously whole number. Char is going to be single character. String is actually just an array of characters, so longer thing. Boolean, true or false, and date is I sort of left that one in because I'm going to probably use it in the structure for a recent score in Comp 1 car project. That's what the sort of main reason it's there, because obviously you don't really use dates a lot when you're writing out. It depends what you're writing really, but yeah. Anyway. So yes, that was just that. Now, if we go into VB.NET, we'll just actually take an actual look at sort of like more the sort of language-specific side of things. So, you can declare global variables can be declared using public, private, or dim. The majority of the time, you just use dim for programs which are running off of a single class file. A class file is, of course, just sort of like this. So obviously here you've only got one class. If I created a new class, then it would load, and you can create a new class, and then they'll show up in a separate window. But I'll talk more about that episode 8 and beyond. For now, we're just working with single class files. So really the only option is dim if you want to declare a local variable. Global variables you can use public or private, but that's, yeah. Anyway, so dim, then you start with your identifier. So in my case it's going to be greeter message. You can't have spaces in variable names, sorry. Greeter message as string, so that's an array of our characters. Greeter message, you can put the assignment on the same line if you're trying to be line efficient, but I just do it on separate lines because it's sort of easier to understand in a way. Greeter message equals, and then you use quotation marks, hello world, exclamation mark, as you always do. Close that off and close off. No, you don't need to close it with brackets, it's not console right now. Right, okay, that brings me to my next line of code, which is console.writeLine. So then we just type in greeter message. Press tab to get that thing to come down, and then to keep the window open so it doesn't just sort of whiz open and flash sort of before you can read it. Obviously we need a console.readLine, and you need parentheses because it's a call for a function or sub, yeah. Right, okay, so then that comes open and just sticks open. Now, yes, right, so I will move on now to a basic sort of calculator, and you can sort of choose to copy the code if you want, or whatever. As integer, so they're sort of variable declaration. Comments are done with an apostrophe for some reason. What happened to good old slash, I don't know. Num1 declaration, dim num2 as integer, num2 declaration, and obviously it's giving me errors down here, or not errors, warnings down here saying they're not used, and that's because I haven't actually used them. It's just like, why do you want yeah. Anyway, dim answer as integer. You usually start variable names, I think it's the standard to start variable names with a uppercase letter, but obviously it doesn't really matter when you're writing something quickly in an exam or whatever. Variable. Then we have console.writeLine, and enter first number, and num1 equals console. In VBL.NET, assignment statements and comparison statements, you can use the same operator, but it's just an equal sign, so that's one less thing to sort of be concerned with. Console.readLine, sorry. Yeah, console.readLine, sorry. Not to be confused with console.readKey. That's something different. Num2 equals console.readLine, sorry. And we need a console.writeLine statement here, that's why I had it in my head. Console.writeLine, enter second number. So our calculator is very basic, it's just going to add the two numbers. I will make a Windows Forms calculator, it's probably going to be one of the first things I do when I get to episode 8, but until then we're stuck with this. So answer equals num1 plus num2, console dot, okay, console right line answer. To concatenate two strings in here is not like a C hash or pretty much any other language. Here you use a AND symbol. The answer is and. How do you do a logical AND? I hear you answer. I hear you ask. Sorry. The answer to that question is you type the AND keyword in. As you can see, that won't blue because that's a keyword. And answer. Okay. And then obviously we need something to keep the window open, so we do console.readLine. And that, I believe, works. So 5 plus 5 is 10. Okay. Right. One last thing. I should have done this first, actually. You can see sort of here it's got this console is in like a sort of like a turquoisey color. That's it's gone that color because it's a reference to a class. Now, it's a reference to the console class, as you can see when I hover over it. And basically, the word VB.net comes from Basic, which was sort of first around. Then they had Visual Basic when they had this sort of form designer thing, which you'll see in episode 8. And then .NET comes from this thing called the .NET framework. The .NET framework is just basically like this sort of thing that's made by Microsoft that has in it loads of sort of instructions for how to make various components of sort of software that you see. So like a drop-down menu box or something like that. So I mean, like this is like a menu strip item up here. It's not quite the same as the one that you see in the form designer, but you'll see that. And other methods like that. There's also this console class, which is obviously makes this window and does stuff for us. Yeah, you'll see more evidence of the .NET framework when we look in the toolbox for other stuff. As you can see, toolbox currently there's no usable controls because this is a module application, not a forms-based application. But just something to be aware of, that's all. But the .NET framework also comes with this built-in like garbage collector is what it's technically called, and it basically goes around and so you don't have to manage your own memory like you do in languages like C++. It sort of automatically just wipes out any sort of active things that it detects you aren't going to use anymore. So that's sort of what the .NET framework composed of. There's other things like ASP.NET, which is used for online stuff and other stuff, but just sort of to be aware of. If you were working in a language like Java or something, you'd be using a different library like the Swing library or something. I say this because there's like sort of online, there's a website called Microsoft Developer Network. You can Google it now if you want. It's like it's almost like Wikipedia for VB.NET and for C# and C++. There's basically all sorts of useful information on there. You'll have probably seen a forum page or another page of it when doing like the homework tasks or whatever that they set. So you'll probably recognise it when you see it. But it is incredibly useful, and there's a lot of useful information on there. So do check that out at some stage if there's something that you're not sure about, or you need to find the code to construct an array or something. Okay, that's pretty much it for today. But in the next tutorial, we're going to start to look at both loops, or iteration, if you want to call it by the fancy name, and also arrays, and sort of storing things in a more advanced sort of way. And also I'm going to introduce you to dynamic arrays, which are like lists, but I'll talk more about that in the next one. As always, thank you for watching, and do comment, rate, subscribe, that sort of thing. See you next time.